Hello everyone, this is Alvaro Cortez Jr., aka Lance Danger, welcoming you back to the Serene Chaos podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. This, as some of you know, was my original podcast back in 2014. A lot of stuff got in the way of being able to do more episodes, but here we are, back in the saddle again, as Ariel Smith would say. And since so much time has passed, I do want to update the original episodes I made with new information and new techniques that I have learned along the way. So, if you're an OG listener, welcome back. I really missed you all. And if you're a new listener, I'm glad you're here giving me a chance. I really don't speak up this much, so it's great to be able to have this conversation with you. And before we continue, a quick reminder that all of my comic book works can be found at www.truthfulcomics.com, where you'll find stuff from my brother-in-arms, Manuel A. Carmona, aka K1, with his comic book Project New Wave, colored by the fantastic Francisco Rivera. If you want more of my personal stuff, like this here podcast, you can go to my very own website, www.artofalvaro.com. You'll find art, videos, blogs, podcasts like this one, as well as other creative stuff and thoughts of mine. Now, why podcast again? Well, I want to take this moment to explain myself, since I really didn't last time I did this show and never really spoken about why I wanted to do podcasts to begin with. So, to start at the beginning, way back when I was just a young whippersnapper, as people say, in high school, the internet wasn't as big as it is now. Though more and more things were getting more accessible online, there really wasn't stuff like YouTube or podcasting. Hell, there wasn't even Google back then, and I am dead serious. Google did not exist back then. But TV and radio were still the kings of media, and also newspapers were in the mix as well. And there wasn't that many outlets out there, for my friends and I, shows that would talk about comic books or video games or movies that had cult followings. You see, all this geek culture was not a pop culture thing yet. It wasn't mainstream. So there were no MCU movies, only the dreams of seeing something like the Avengers on the big screen instead of what we actually got, which was that 90s direct-to-video Captain America movie. Yeah, it was pretty much the Dark Ages. But we did have fun listening to some radio shows. My personal favorites were a show on Sundays called Magic Nights, hosted by the dearly departed legendary Puerto Rican DJ Billy Furquet. Rest in peace. That show was a segment on a radio station called La Mega Estación in Puerto Rico. And they'd play chill music like ballads and rock ballads, which is what I preferred to be honest. I prefer to listen to that kind of music when I was a kid creating the world of Fred Peterson, the mighty warlord, which if you have read before, you'll see that there's a lot of emotional stuff and a lot of songs that kind of ties into it. And then throughout high school, that show was canceled, but Billy Forquette would join another DJ named Rocky the Kid, who's another big DJ in Puerto Rico, and formed the show Mega Chat on Monday nights. And it's still my favorite radio show ever. I mean, granted, they borrowed a lot of stuff from shows like Howard Stern, who pretty much was the king of all media back then in the mid to late 90s. After a hard day's work at school, I just go to my room, put on the headphones into the stereo system that I had in my bedroom, whip out my notebook and my pencils. Whew, and nothing else in the world mattered. Just my own little world in the theater of my mind. And those were really the good old days in that sense of, growing up and being creative. So the show itself went on from 9 p.m. till 12 a.m. So the hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, I'd spend doing art and creating. Then the last hour or so, I'd just take time to chill and listen, kind of ease into getting ready to call it a day afterwards. Sometimes my friends and I, in between talks of our, favorite geeky, nerdy stuff, we'd kind of review and give our own thoughts to each other about the latest costume change or death in comics or how digital coloring was starting to really change the game back then. Especially when you would see like the X-Men comics when they would do like the more glossy paper to cater to that coloring. And of course, movies and music and video games. And a lot of times we would just half jokingly say, damn, dude, imagine if we had a radio show. I hate there isn't a show that talked about this stuff. And that was something that I guess kind of stayed with me even till now. Now see, I am a proud card-carrying member of Generation X. I have seen how technology like computers, handheld devices, and internet have changed the landscape. And one time, I want to say around 2010, I was introduced to podcasts. And I found people that were just like me, talking about comics and movies and musics, anything. And they didn't have to be on TV or the radio. They could just, for better or worse, do their own unfiltered show. And that was mind-blowing to me when I would listen to that while I was working on my comics or freelance stuff. And again, all those what ifs that my friends and I would talk about kind of just came rushing back to me until I decided I wanted to do my own podcast dedicated to webcomic making. And later on, my bro Manuel and I did the Truthful Comics podcast, which was so fun to do. And we also had rotating guest commentators with us on board, like Corey Rockbottom Davis of Jet Boy fame and Rigo Scorp Jimenez, who is a great comics creator of underground alternative comics, and we just chill and talk about comics and comic book news and just chill. And it felt like those days in high school again, just talking nerd stuff with my friends, and it was just cathartic. And therein lies the why. Why do this and why do this again. I've always been the type of person that doesn't want to wonder what if. Life is complicated as it is, so I want to do this podcast for the kid in me that always wanted to share his voice and creativity any which way he could. For the creative in me that wants to hear a podcast like mine, because maybe there's someone out there that perhaps wants to listen to a show like this one too, because I honestly haven't really seen many podcasts that talk about webcomics, and that's kind of one of my goals, not only to just talk about my process about creating webcomics, but I also want to, yes, talk about webcomics and indie comics in general, and just kind of, go over the ones that I like to read, the ones that are my favorite, and ones that other up and coming webcomic creators that aren't really exactly sure of how to do theirs, perhaps kind of steer them into the right direction, so to speak. So I am very excited to be doing this again. In the same vein of the original, as I mentioned before, I will be talking about my webcomic making process and my process of being a freelance writer as well, because since then I've also not only written for Project New Wave, the aforementioned Project New Wave from Manuela Carmona, I've also done some other freelance writing stuff as well, as some of you may know, for Jose Cruz's Silver Island Studio, where I did short stories in collaboration with Jose Cruz for the comic books past number 1 and 2, and also for the issue number 1 of El Gran Matatán, which was his origin issue. So, also from time to time, I want to interview other creatives as well to keep bringing in fresh points of views that I hope we can all learn from, especially me, because I always want to have that mind open to learning anything new. And most importantly, just have fun. That is one of the main things that I want to focus on. And it was one of the focus on the original run of podcasts as well. I want to have fun with this, and hopefully that fun will be projected into this podcast, and you guys will have as much fun listening, perhaps while you're creating your own thing, as much as I'm making these, because at the end of the day, again, this is just me kind of reliving that kid in me that wanted to perhaps have more conversations about these things with a wider audience. As narcissistic as that may sound to an extent, but it is important to kind of find your own pack, your own coven, your own buddies, and just have fun. Just remember to have fun, because sometimes life goes by so fast and hits you so hard that you just forget to have fun along the way. And it takes a while to remember it. And sometimes it doesn't even come from yourself. Sometimes it takes someone else or something in particular to kind of make that switch click in your mind and say, hey, I haven't had some fun in a while. I need this for my own mental health to be able to function later on, because it is such an important thing to just shut down your brain, open a good comic book, or if you're into novels, open up a good book, or turn on your tablets or any kind of reading device that you may have. It's all love. Whether it's physical media or it's through the tablets, creative is creative and fun is fun. So whatever you have that makes you have fun and just forget about things for a little bit, that is priceless, my friends. So seriously, I want this to be fun for myself and for you, the listeners, as well. And again, hopefully it'll be a great learning experience. And I am going to try to keep it at a good mid-range. Before, since I didn't plan it that much, the shows would either come out a little too long or a little too short. So I want to compromise and do podcasts that are 20 to 30 minutes in length. I think that's good enough to give some good information out there and have some good conversations out there, unless it's an interview. For interviews, I would like to go for like that perhaps at least 1 hour mark. Because again, with interviews, since it'll be another person, there's going to be the banter and the questions, and not just from myself, hopefully from people as well asking questions for whoever I may end up interviewing as well. So it's a different dynamic when it comes to interviews. And I always thought that interviews are so much fun when they're at least an hour long, because you're able to get so much information and perhaps learn so much just from listening from the story of someone else offering a different perspective on something. Well, anyway, that's since I am going to aim for that 20 to 30 minute mark. I am going to call it a day for now for this episode. Rather than trying a weekly podcast like I originally tried to do, I am aiming for bi-weekly. So next time that we meet online, I will be updating that book list of resources and inspirations that I talked about in the original episode 1 of the Serene Chaos podcast. If you're curious to listen to that one, you can find it either on my YouTube channel, which is Lance Danger, or in my Patreon, where you can also find me as Lance Danger as well. I will leave all the pertinent links wherever I can and wherever I post all these podcasts and whatnot. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening. Remember to stay creative, stay safe, and be warm and caring to one another. And once again, thank you all so much for listening to this, giving me another chance to express myself creatively. And if there's one wish that I have for this show and for all of you, is for all of you to somehow find your own voice in all this, your own creative voice, and for you guys to be able to entertain people at the same level that we ourselves were entertained by all these wonderful comics and movies, music, theater, whatever it is that's creative that brought you calm or inspiration. I wish for you and for myself as well to be able to bring that level of comfort to other people as well. Anyway, that's enough of my yammering. Once again, thank you again for listening, and I will catch you on the next episode.